Just waiting for it to let me know we are recording. There you go. We should be get started. So, hello everyone and welcome everyone. My name is Mike Osborne. You've probably gathered that by now, and this is the final Accessible Me Inclusive Insights session of the year, Disability by Design. And what we're going to be speaking around for the next hour is exactly that. It's making sure that we are considering accessibility right from the start of the process. Not being tacked on as an afterthought. Now that may be where the organisation is right now, or you as an individual. There's no judgment, and my goal of the session isn't to get everybody to the top of accessibility ladder and be experts, but wherever you are on your accessibility journey, even if you're yet to take that first step, my goal is to help everybody a couple of steps up from where we are. Getting started then, my name is Mike Osborne. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the founder of Accessible Me. Thank you for joining our final session, Inclusive Insights session of the year. Today, what we're going to be exploring is why accessibility is no longer a feature. It's part of the future for every business. It doesn't matter what you do. You will have people with disabilities wanting to use your services, use your products, or maybe even join your team. And by expanding your team with people with disabilities, you will invite other individuals who see themselves in that, and you'll invite customers to do the same. I'm a neurodivergent cocktail. I have Tourette's, ADHD, autism, depression, and anxiety, so a whole host of different things. And I've got over 13 years of experience in learning and development. For anyone who is joining into the session today and cannot see me, I am a white male in my mid-30s. I've got dark hair, a short beard, and yeah, not much more exciting to say, really. I want to begin the session with accessibility in itself. So if you are just joining, you are welcome to turn on the captions if you need them. I'm not running PowerPoint's automatic captioning today, but if you go to the three dots in More, scroll down to Language and Speech, you should be able to show live captions in your language if English isn't your first language. Captions are always are welcome, but are optional. And if you'd like to speak at any point during this session, whether you have a question or you simply can't use chat, then please turn your camera on if you can. This will allow anyone who relies on lip reading to follow along. Say your name before you begin, so if anyone can't see you, it helps them understand who's speaking. And then ask your question. This is going to help people who rely on visual or auditory cues. The chat will be active throughout today's session, so I do aim to make this as interactive as I possibly can. And I will be asking questions and giving you time to respond. You can download today's deck, so don't worry about writing everything you can down. And the deck does include the resources and links that we will cover during the session. So let's take a moment to get to know who's in the room. If you haven't already, and just to let you know that the chat is working, before we get into the content, I'd love to know who's here. So in the chat, please let us know your name, although that should be showing in Teams anyway, where you're joining from, and by that I mean both location and company. Let us know your role and your organisation. All chat participants today is entirely voluntary. If you prefer just to listen along, there's no expectation for you to join in, but if you are able to do so, that will be fantastic. I'll give you a moment to do that now, and with that, as we get to know each other a little more, I'm going to set the plan for the next hour. I'm just going to open the chat to my side so I can see it as well. Now that it seems people are joining slightly less. That's a little bit of an icebreaker. One of the things I'd love to throw out to yourselves as well is, what does accessibility mean to you in terms of joining the session? Now, there's no right or wrong answer. I'm not looking for the dictionary definition of accessibility, but whether you're using a pen and paper to make notes today, whether you're using your favorite note-taking app, or whether you want to use the chat, let me know what barriers you've seen in digital content. They might be barriers you've experienced, or you simply seen and go, oh, if I was signing that, I wouldn't have done it that way. And this can be in websites, it can be in learning, it can be in whatever product or service, in any context. It doesn't even have to be digital accessibility as well. These can be a restaurant with steps, for example, and no ramp alternative. If you've seen it, it'd be fantastic to hear from you and let others know what kind of barriers they need to be mindful of, because disability by design, the more we're aware of, the more we can do to change that. I can just look a quick look at the chat. And for that, I'm looking at my alternate screen. I can see Katie, a designer from the Dorset Wildlife Trust, Sarah, HR manager from Gwent Wildlife Trust, so a couple from the Wildlife Trust, which is fantastic. Jen Squires from Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, again, hello. Sandy from North London, a lecturer in healthcare and social care. So a nice variety of people on today's session, which is absolutely fantastic. Forgive me if I mispronounce your name here, and do feel free to correct me, but I'm going to say that's Teyusuni. So again, hello. A user interface and user experience designer from Nigeria. I think you are winning so far, and who's joining us from further away? Who's from Coventry, a learning design and content. That's fantastic. No comments on the what does accessibility mean for you yet, and that's absolutely fine. We'll continue at this stage. So today's agenda, why are you joining for the next hour? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to start by grounding accessibility as a business critical part of the strategy. In addition to that, we will look at common gaps that leaders still miss. So you may see this in your own workplace. You may not. It'd be interesting to hear your feedback towards the end of the session. Then we'll look at what's coming in 2026 with the ADA Title II guidelines. When I say ADA Title II, that is the Americans with Disability Act. And I know many people joining today are not from America, but we do have the European Accessibility Act here in Europe. We do have the UK Equality Act of 2010 as well. So wherever you're joining from, there's likely to be accessibility legislation in some way. In most cases, they point to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines or WCAG in some way. And so what we share will still be relevant. After that, I'm going to share some tools and frameworks that you can take away after the session and hopefully use straight away. So, and we will finish with questions and answers as well. And throughout the session, I'm going to pause at different stages to kind of check you've understood what I was saying and to give space for reflection. So before we dive in, let's check where your understanding is right now. I'm just going to let Freya back into the session. So to make the session as useful as possible and to help me guiding from here, please rate your current understanding of accessibility in the chat on a scale of kind of 0 to 10. A 0 means you've never heard of the term accessibility, which I think is unlikely on this. A 1 means you're new to the topic. 5 means you know the basic. A 9 means you feel confident. And if you're confident enough to go for a 10, that means, Mike, you can stand back and I can lead the session. There's the right or wrong answer here. It just simply gives me a sense of where the room is at. Looking to come in, I can see 8s, 7s, 5s, 9s, so a broad variety of the scale here. A couple more 5s, a couple of 6s. So as I mentioned earlier, with using that analogy, hopefully I can get a number of people to one step up from where they are. If you're already at 9, that's a tall order for me, but certainly the 5s and 6s, if I can get used to 6s and 7s, and that's not me doing the 6-7 thing, that'll be a win for me. But with that, let's begin our first section on why accessibility is business critical. So again, before we dive any deeper, a quick pulse check for the room. When we talk about a quick pulse check, it'd be interesting to know where you are at in terms of your confidence for explaining why accessibility matters from a business point of view. So slightly different from an awareness of what accessibility is, but explain why it matters to the business. So not the legal view, but in the business sense. Again, if you want to use the numbers 1 to 10, I'm going to keep an eye out there, but they may start getting mixed up with what we were talking about previously. When we talk about accessibility, then many people think of it as a feature, an extra, or something to be added on at the end. But in reality, accessibility is something that shapes how people experience your products, how they experience your training, and how they experience your services. And this can be everything from discovery. I found out about this business on Instagram, but unfortunately they're missing alt text and their images couldn't speak to me. It could be the experience. Imagine you've made a booking at a restaurant, the staff welcome you and go to show you to your table, but unfortunately that table is at the step and you are a wheelchair user, and they never ask the question, do you have any access needs? It could be the evaluation. I hear a number of companies say no one's ever complained about accessibility of our businesses or products. And then I look at the feedback form, and they're not asking the question, or the form itself is not accessible. So ultimately, accessibility is a fundamental part of good design. Every barrier you remove in accessibility increases reach, which is great for anyone doing kind of marketing. Every barrier you leave in place reduces completion. So if the goal of your business is to sell, say for example, you're selling products online, ultimately you want people to go through that process. You want them to learn about you. You ultimately then want them to add things to the basket and to check out. Or in an e-learning content, you want them to complete the course and take the quiz at the end. Every barrier that remains, whether that's a vision one, a hearing one, speech, or even mobility, increases the number of support tickets you get and creates a reputational risk for your business. The organizations we work with, including those in the kind of the financial sector, the public sector, they all consistently see that kind of when accessibility improves, so does the user satisfaction, so does trust, and that might be on the consumer side of things. It might be on the colleague experience. If you can get accessibility right for your team, I can almost guarantee it that staff satisfaction will go up, as will psychological safety. In turn, productivity will go up and so will innovation. So this all aligns what I see daily through kind of our cognitive testing and client audits. Thinking of your own organization then, what do you believe is driving conversations about accessibility today? Is it kind of A, consumer experience? Is it B, the employee experience? C, compliance? D, brand? Or E, something else entirely? And if it is something else, again, feel free to pop your ideas into chat or to write that down. Okay, that's just my note taker. I just see somebody making notes, but that's absolutely fine. Before we move on, then, does anyone have any questions or a thought on the business case side of accessibility? If you'd like to speak, you can turn on your camera. And if you can, when I invite you, say your name and then ask your question. Give that a couple of seconds. Not seeing any messages to let me know if anyone's planning to write at the moment, so that's fine. So now that we've grounded accessibility in real business outcomes, let's move on then to look at kind of what a number of leaders kind of don't realize. And these are the hidden gaps in the digital roadmaps that quietly block inclusion. So we'll explore these together as next. Starting with a quick question then, in your teams, when do these conversations around accessibility normally happen? Let's go kind of 1 for early, 2 for midway, or 3 near the end. If it, 1, so early, which is fantastic. I will stress this: the earlier on you can have these conversations, the more money you're going to save your organization down the line. The amount of times I'm brought in at the end to go, hey, we built this platform, can we get your feedback? And I may have 6 pages of feedback, which might add 3 months and around 50,000 to your project. Whereas if you'd have taken the time to do these things from the snip, you could save a lot of money along the way. So most of you are doing accessibility early, which is fantastic. A digital roadmap then is not just a list of features, it's a sequence of decisions. So if accessibility is missing from those decisions, even just once, it's going to create some friction that includes everyone. You can have all your dominoes lined up, but if 1 or 2 of those are missing, you're not going to get actually hit them over. You're not going to get that smooth chain to the end. And this is something I see a lot again in our audits. A single design choice, like a complex menu, drag and drop things, dense text, so all these blocks of text which could be simplified in lists. All of these things, they shape the whole experience. And developers often only see these barriers later, when the cost is much more expensive to fix. So well done to all of you who are saying you're already doing this early on. Instructional designers, my background is 13 years in learning development, so many of you joining today's call will be in the kind of the L&D context. But those of us in L&D, they face similar issues in kind of learning platforms. So again, when these barriers are found early, you'll find that projects run smoother, and when they are found late, everything slows down. It's a sad kind of just fact of the way things are. In terms of reflecting on this, try and think of one example where poor accessibility has slowed the process down your side. That might be a form, it might be a system, might even be an online training module. You don't need to share anything here. Just let me know if you've ever seen any of these happen. As we continue then to take this a little further, missing accessibility doesn't just create friction, it also creates risks. Next year, in April, that risk is significantly going to grow when the changes come into effect with ADA Title II. In your own work, where do you most want to improve the user experience? So we've talked about where in the process are you starting at the moment. Are you looking to kind of improve the user experience in training, in onboarding? Are you looking to improve the user experience on your website or your internal tools? Wherever that is, accessibility it's not something that only helps people with disabilities. When we design for, if I give you a few examples, the electric toothbrush was designed originally as a mobility aid. The dropped curb is something that was originally designed to help people with disabilities. And if you can imagine pulling your heavy luggage along in an airport and then it suddenly drops off the curb and breaks the wheels, you're going to have a frustrating journey home. Also helps those of us who are parents pushing prams. So hopefully you'll start to see already, that designing for accessible content, it creates clearer content, it creates simpler, things that are simpler and more useful experiences for everyone, not just the individuals with disability. This is why accessibility is a strategic enabler then, and not just another checkbox. So ultimately, every time you reduce memory load, you simplify navigation, or you provide clarity, you remove friction. You remove some friction. A lot of you might be familiar with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. If you're not already familiar with COGA, the Cognitive Accessibility Guidelines, do Google those after the session because, again, they cover things that the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines miss or don't include normally because of the difficulties and the challenges in testing for them. One of the biggest insights I kind of bring from the testing and auditing we do is that what helps a neurodivergent user, like myself with my various conditions, almost improves the experience for everyone else. That creates a stronger business case. It improves the business performance. It means fewer errors, and in many cases, it improves trust. Again, if you're looking at the slide where we have fewer errors, clearer journeys, faster completion, more trust, if you had to pick one of these from the slide in terms of what would make the biggest difference for your organization, what would it be? Would it be the clearer journeys? Would it be the faster completion? Or something else entirely? If you want to let me know in the chat, that'd be fantastic. And for Sandy, who's commented in the chat already, I can see one of the goals is to ensure all teaching materials are inclusive. I love that answer for a number of reasons. Most and foremost, quite often a lot of the challenges I see in learning materials stem from the brand guidelines. They stem from the templates, the tools and templates that were designed by a brand marketer who's gone, yeah, this is the way it needs to be, and it needs to be uniform. But they were designed for sessions where I'm delivering like this. They weren't delivered to be in an auditorium where people may be far back of the room. They weren't designed for people joining on their mobile. So if you can imagine this session today, if I had a lot of text on the screen and the font size was small, and you're joining from your mobile, you may be squinting to follow along. Any questions on this before we kind of move on to the next session on what leaders often miss in roadmaps? I can see Pooja's commented clearer journeys, so looking to get clearer journeys. Hopefully, that's looking at the user experience, moving way through the system. Sarah also says ensuring the recruitment journey is inclusive. A fantastic one. Because ultimately, if the recruitment journey isn't inclusive, then you're not going to engage people in these teams. And one thing I want to highlight here is you could meet all of the Web Content Accessibility Guideline criteria and still have a system at the end of it that's not inclusive. And that can be for a variety of reasons. You might use ableist language. You might use gendered language. People might look at the website and see the team is is all white or mostly male, or the leadership is mostly white men, and how about those of us with disabilities, those of us with a limb difference, a skin condition like vitiligo, if we don't, one of the most common ones I see is, there's a lot of people from the age of, say, 18 to 30, but fewer individuals represented in imagery with silver hair. All of these things, if we don't see ourselves in the content, if we don't see ourselves in the services, the advertising, the job adverts, we're likely not going to apply. So getting this right and being mindful of these different areas really does make a big difference. So let's build on this a little more. If accessibility drives all these barriers or all these benefits, sorry, as I've said, why do so many digital roadmaps still fall short? And this is where we're going to head to next. So again, to start us off, in your organization, when does accessibility usually enter the conversation? We've answered, some of you have already answered this previously in saying early, midway, or at the end. But ultimately, when leaders are creating the digital roadmaps, they're usually focused on features. They're focused on timelines. How soon can we get this to market? They're looking at budgets. So how cheaply can we do this in most cases? And they're looking at the resource. Do we have the expertise to build this in-house? Yes or no? And in most cases, that resource is, can the people use code? Can they use articulate storylines? They're not actually doing those checks of, can they code with accessibility in mind? Can they use articulate rise and make sure they're getting the best of the accessibility features? Can I use Outlook and make sure I'm getting the best from those? Regardless of the setup, what's missing in most of these is it's a simple question. It's not, if I take a learning objective, quite often I see these presentations like this, they present these learning objectives at the start of the session. The way they evaluate the session is they get to the end and say, oh, did we hit those learning objectives? And in most cases, they will say, yeah, I think we did. If you flip that on the head then and go, okay, who might not be able to do this? Who will struggle to do this? Is there anyone we are leaving behind? If you add that extra question and we ask, and what can we do to prevent that from happening? You might look at some of the government's user personas, for example, and if you look at disability personas and evaluate your content in that way, and go, okay, can these individuals, can they engage with our services? Can they apply for our jobs? Can they take our e-learning? It's going to make your content a lot more inclusive. So these are the gaps we see repeatedly in audits and the strategy sessions. Teams assuming that someone else has already checked for accessibility. So, hey, it's not my responsibility. So there's someone in the team that deals with that. There's designers assuming that developers will capture it. So yeah, I've done the design, I've done the storyboarding, and it's up to the development team to make sure they do this correctly. So passing the buck. Leaders assuming that accessibility is kind of built into the tools they're already buying. So articulate storyline or articulate rise, for example. Yes, you can build accessible content in them, but they're not necessarily accessible by design. You still have to do some of the manual work. And ultimately, as a result, the barriers too often go unnoticed until it's far too late. And that's because accessibility isn't yet a feature, and it ultimately, accessibility needs to be a foundation. When accessibility is missing from the foundations of what you're setting up, everything else that's built on top becomes a lot harder. So again, in the chat, just let me know a simple yes or no here, or a Y for yes or an N for no. Have you ever discovered an accessibility issue kind of right before launch, or even after launch? If you're sharing anything sensitive here, feel free just to write this down and take it back to your team. If that's a yes, the chances are it is something you can take into one of your next stand-ups. Hey, have we checked from accessibility before we approved this design, or before we release this product to market? Seeing quite a few yeses here, so hopefully, with shining a light on this and creating awareness, we're starting to think about this as we go forward. So before we move on, do let me know in the chat if there are any kind of questions or reflections on these hidden gaps. Otherwise, next we're going to look at the specific stages where accessibility kind of slips in from the roadmap. Just looking at a comment here, sometimes we don't even have awareness of the right guidelines, which leads to planning gaps. That awareness is something I hear time and time again, and thankfully, if you want to look at our Inclusive Insights back catalogue or engage with us at Accessible Meet as a service, this is absolutely something we can help your team with, whether that's strategic consulting, whether that's training on the topic, or even our accessibility themed escape room. Hey, moving on though, looking at this journey, the journey on screen, I'm taking people on a journey here from procurement, moving from procurement to discovery, from discovery to design, design to build, build to testing, and testing to launch. Looking at this journey then, what stage do you think loses accessibility most often? Again, just let me know in the chat if you're comfortable to do so. No right or wrong answer here. Nobody's going to go away with a slapped wrist in voluntarily answering and getting a mistake. See Joe commenting, so I'm going to keep an eye out for answers. And as we do this, then when we talk about digital roadmaps, this is often the life cycle we mean. So Joe's commented, really interested in the disability personas I've mentioned, didn't realize they existed. So after the session, I will send an email out with a recording to this. I will, don't worry about going away and doing too much research. I'll simply include those personas so you can go away and use them in terms of going things forward. To kind of expand a little more then in terms of when this typically happens, but in procurement, leaders often purchase tools or systems without checking the accessibility statements before doing that, or before they've been tested with accessibility assistive technologies. And later on then, teams discover that quite often some kind of major barriers are there and they can't fix that internally. So they have to go to the service provider or they have to do some additional work, and quite often that can be expensive. In the discovery phase, user research doesn't include people with disabilities or neurodivergent users, and as a result, problems are invisible. In the design phase, you might quite often see heavy text, complex navigation such as drag and drop or kind of buttons moving around, color-only indicators. So, if somebody makes a mistake, highlighting that in red. Whereas you could pair that with an icon, for example, a little X or a warning icon, and high cognitive load. So all of these things get introduced early. Next on in the build phase, developers receive designs that were never tested for accessibility, and now the fixes are becoming expensive. In the testing phase, testing is rushed because we've taken longer on the build or anything else, and therefore we haven't got the same amount of time. And because we've committed to the deadlines, we said, hey, this is where we're going to release this. The testers are skipping corners. The screen reader testing might not happen. The cognitive testing might almost never happen. And even though it's in the testing phases where we actually catch some of the biggest usability issues. And finally on launch, too late by this stage, but teams launch a product thinking everything is fine until the users struggle and complaints appear. And in the age where we have things like Trustpilot or these review sites, it's becoming more important than ever, especially with the influencers on social media. If you have a disabled influencer saying, hey, I had a terrible time in this restaurant, or I had a terrible time trying to access this learning, they're going to let their followers know, and their followers may join the influencer in looking elsewhere, and people will often spend more for a service that has them in mind. So all of this then mirrors the kind of the themes of my work again. Memory load, attention, as you can imagine, myself with ADHD can be a challenge, sequencing issues, task flows. Again, all of these things are found late because nobody with relevant experience was included in the design. And in terms of getting you to reflect then, if you could improve accessibility in kind of one of these stages next year, what stage would have the biggest impact for you? Just again, looking at the chat, I can see testing should be before designing. Testing should be at every stage. So, you should design and test the design before going out. But again, if I've got anything in the wrong order here, please don't take it as gospel and do challenge me on it. I'm also going to bring up, for those in the learning development model, the ADDIE model, the analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. An interesting model that kind of aligns for this process as well, and at every stage, whether you're doing the an initial analysis and you're doing those focus groups, for example, make sure people with disabilities are in those focus groups. If you can have people with disabilities on your design team, you can, such as color blindness, for example, or just say, yeah, I'm thinking of using this color scheme. And I'm aware you've got color blindness. Could you check this? Checking at each stage of the process is going to be pretty significant. Ultimately, though, this isn't just a session on kind of having a moan or highlighting the barriers. I do want to help you with some practical fixes as well. So let's move on to kind of why accessibility still gets missed here, even the organizations that really do care about it. As we do that, in a word, what do you think the biggest misconception is around accessibility? Something I'll come back to in a moment. And let's see if if kind of what you're thinking about appears on the slide. So the points that are going to come up in a moment appear in almost any organization we support, not because people don't care, but because the processes they weren't built with people with disability with accessibility in mind. First and foremost, then, it's the tools. The tools can't replicate or replace human judgment. So, and a passing score for accessibility doesn't guarantee usability. If it's tested against the WCAG 2.2 to a level AA for feature, for example, it's still going to miss some people on the outliers, which is where the AAA criteria come in. Next up, there's limited testing. So testing often focuses on visual or kind of keyboard checks, and the cognitive barriers remain invisible. Without people who have lived experience in the design, the roadmap often misses critical insights. Leaders treat accessibility as something you can add later. So, I've experienced this in businesses I've worked in, businesses I've worked with. I flag accessibility and they go, yeah, let's just get it ready first, and then we can I promise you, Mike, we will add all these things later, often when it's too late. Ownership is unclear, so nobody knows who's responsible, so nobody acts. I'm sure if any of these ring true for you, these are all themes which do come out in our strategic analysis work, our client work, and organizations face uncertainty. In most instances, they face uncertainty, not an unwillingness to do it. They genuinely want to improve. They just don't know where to start. And if that sounds familiar, one of the things I can do again after this is to share a link with you to help you think about how we might start to do this in your organization. In the chat then, whilst this slide is up, if you can let us know one thing from the slide that feels kind of most familiar in your organization. Does your organization have the over-reliance on tools, testing, a lack of a lived experience, seeing it as a later task or ownership task? Just put one of those words in the chat and then let us know what the most common barriers are, and if you're interested, how we as an organization can help you as well. Lived experience, that's going to be a big one, and again, if that's an area where you'd like support in the future, please don't hesitate to get in chat, in touch. Okay, I did promise to look at what's going to change in 2026. So in the chat, let me know, before this session, were you aware that ADA Title II is being updated with stronger digital requirements in the coming year, or did you not? I forgive everyone in the European market or the non-American market, because ultimately what's happening overseas with the leadership and everything else, it influences what we have to do over here, but doesn't control it. Ultimately, then, what Title II covers is public sector organizations in the United States. The upcoming rules, they basically strengthen what should have been there to start with. So the reason there's ADA Title II rather than just ADA is the Americans with Disability Act was put in place to help people or to force public sector bodies to consider people with disabilities, but they were so loose and woolly. They were very, very difficult to enforce. So what Title II is looking to do is it's strengthening the requirements for websites, digital services, and learning platforms. And ultimately, if your organization is not US based, but you have US clients or anything else, these changes still matter. So it's worth exploring. And regulators around the world, they all tend to follow kind of similar patterns. So if your country doesn't have that yet, It might soon, where one move often others follow. So then my next question is, well, why does this matter for everyone? And the answer simply to that is because accessibility is shifting kind of from being optional to being essential. It's moving away from kind of just being best practice. There's something to strive to being baseline. And let's face it, accessibility should be expected of your organization. It shouldn't have to be extra. So these updates, they signal that inaccessible services, they're no longer acceptable. They never were, but even legally speaking, now we're starting to clamp down on this. So this is designed to provide clearer language about what must be accessible, how quickly this should be accessible, and kind of and what the standards are. So these shifts mirror what we see in Europe with the European Accessibility Act, in the UK with the UK Equality Act of 2010, and across the global organisations we support. In a nutshell, expectations are rising, leaders expect more, and the regulators expect more as well. So again, if this is new to you, what's your first reaction to hearing this? Is it something that's going to be useful for your organisation? Is it something that's concerning? Oh, we got quite a lot to do in the next couple of months before April. Is it expected? Hey, you saw this coming. Europe, we're doing this, so it's only a matter of time before we're going to do it. Or is it encouraging? Are you excited to see these things are happening? Whatever it is, feel free to again to make a note or just drop it in the chat. And with that, what we're going to do now is to explore how these shifts they influence risk, reputation, and readiness in your organization. Once again, in the chat, if you're willing to use it, let me know which word matters most to your organization. Is it risk? Is it kind of the compliance? Are you worried about getting fines? Is it trust? Is it I want the trust of my team? I want the trust of my consumers? Or is it compliance? Is it we're doing this because of the law that lets us know? Trust is one that's coming in straight away. It'd be interesting to see if that's echoed from anyone else. Ultimately, legal compliance, yes, it's important, but by far, it's certainly from our perspective, the bigger and the faster moving risk is reputation. Most organisations they're not going to face legal action. It might be because they're small, they don't have the budget. But what you are going to find is public complaints, internal criticism. So if somebody left because your organization put barriers to them succeeding in the workplace, they're going to go on Glassdoor. They're going to leave reviews, and they're going to let potential fantastic hires know that hey, this isn't an accessible place to work. This isn't an inclusive place to work. Or you might lose user trust. So ultimately, when when your service is inaccessible, people talk about it. And when people talk about it, social media amplifies it. The employees, they experience it in your team. Your customers experience it then because if there's nobody in your team that looks like them, then they might not relate to your business or your brand or your product as much. Students experience it, and whether that's students going through your online learning, whether that's going through your higher education program, and ultimately then your organization loses credibility. And again, we see this frequently with our audits. The issue is rarely bad intention. It's normally a gap in the design. It's normally poor tooling, so the tools don't allow me to, or I don't know how to use the tools. And very, very, very often it's inaccessible templates. So when I audit content for most organizations, I ask to see the templates as well. I audit the templates first and foremost, because if I can say, hey, about 80% of the problem here is the template, and therefore most of your services, if we can get the templates right, it's going to save a lot of time. You'd be amazed at how much time that saves. Not just sorting the templates, though. Sometimes you need a bit of training as well to say this is how to use the templates correctly. Again, all this is going to make a big difference. Ultimately, though, the user doesn't see the internal changes; they only see the friction. When people get annoyed because of the sensory overwhelm in the workplace. Somebody's opened a smelly tuna sandwich next to them. Somebody's having a conversation across the room, or There's nobody that looks like me on the website. This is why the most successful organizations, they don't wait for legislation. They act early, both to kind of protect trust and to demonstrate leadership. And if I give you kind of a non-accessibility example, but look at what Disney and Netflix are doing, in terms of broader representation, not just a pure translation of the original Little Mermaid, for example, but uh, changing it up for a modern audience. People may look at that then and go, "Hey, I could be a Disney princess." All of this is going to make a big difference. So in terms of how I want you to reflect from this, when you think about your own digital landscape, what would be the biggest brand risk if accessibility isn't addressed? Is it going to be your slow processes? Is it going to be lost users? And believe me, that's going to happen. Is it going to be something else? If you're making notes as we go, do write it down. If you're happy to let me know in the chat, then please do. So once again, if you have any questions before we look at kind of what your organization can do now, do pop them in the chat, and I'll try and make sure we cover those in the Q&A towards the end of the session. What I want to finish this section with, though, is the most important part, and that's what actions should you and should your organization be doing before kind of 2026 arrives. Oops, I've gone too fast. So I can see Joe's commented again, trust, because then users don't feel safe and they don't come to us. That's exactly it. Trust is a big one. If you lose the trust in your team, let's face it, as a kind of a bit of an abstract example, every time redundancies come up, if your name is on the list of the prospects, even if you stay in the organization, then that trust is broken. You don't feel, hey, this organization values me. You kind of go, well, maybe they didn't value me as much as I thought, and you look elsewhere. And similar is true of accessibility. I work with events companies, and they might say, Mike, we since engaging with you, we've done all these things. We've now got a sensory room, and it's fantastic. We've done all these things, and I go, okay, that's fantastic. Where on your website does it say that you've done these things? Because if someone's been to your event a couple of years ago and they had a terrible experience, they're not going to know to come back if you're not telling people what you're doing. So in the chat, once again, let me know which of these 5 your organization is doing. Are you starting early? Are you reviewing your journeys, your digital journeys, from people landing on your website, finding you through social media to go to the checkout or to book your course? Are you auditing key services? Are you thinking about your strategy for next year and making accessibility baked in from the start? Or are you training your teams? Ultimately, for us preparing for next year, we're halfway through December almost. Preparing for 2026 isn't about fear, it's about maturity. So organizations like you being on today's call, for instance, organizations that start now, they're going to be in a better position when these expectations rise in the new year. ADA Type 2 comes into effect in April. The European Accessibility Act is already in effect. It has been in effect since June this year. And ultimately, you don't want to get to June 2026 when the European Accessibility Act's been into effect for a year and have done nothing. So here's what preparing now is going to look like in practice. You can start early. These small steps now are going to prevent large barriers early. Later, you can review your journeys. So you might look at your websites, you might look at forms, you might look at the learning platforms or employee processes. A great place to look at is your analytics. If people are landing on your website and they're never checking out, they're never booking with you, it might not be a problem with your booking system. It might be that the barriers in place to get there. People don't know what to do. They don't know what they need to do in your e-learning to get to the next stage. Auditing then, so light touch audits give you clarity and direction. You could be building accessibility into your strategy, so you can tie that into transformation projects, digital teams, HR, and learning development. Wherever you work, you can influence accessibility in many ways, and you can train your team. So one of the biggest wins you can do is to let people know what good looks like. Training is a force multiplier. So as soon as people are aware, you can absolutely drive change. And there is a QR code on the screen. If you scan that QR code, not necessarily now, but maybe after the session, you'll see our accessibility kickstart model. It's simple, practical, low risk first steps that build momentum. So we can help you. We can do a light touch audit and we can review your digital journey. We can have a one-to-one strategy session if you like, where I can speak to your leadership or speak to your team. You can get access to the Accessible Me Academy, our award-nominated content, or you can experience the escape route, experience some of these barriers for yourselves. You know, there are different things that I'm not saying you have to do this, and in joining the session, you're not obliged to do any of this, but there are things out there, and it could be with our competitors as well. You know, whether it's us, whether it's them, just take some action. And what I'd love for you to think about is what one thing from this slide feels most achievable for you right now, in the next month, in the first quarter of the next year, for example. You know, you don't need to let me know in the chat. Just give it some thought. That's the why then. You've covered the why, and in the last couple of minutes of the session, we're going to move into the how. So exploring practical frameworks that you can apply. Framework one then is starting with the user. So in one word, where do you think your users are struggling most? Is it the navigation of your learning, your job forms, your website? Is it in the text? Is it in the forms that they have to complete? Is it the noise? Do we have auto playing video on the website that won't turn off? Is it the noisiness that your colleagues experience in these back to work scenarios and they prefer working at home? Or is it something else? Just give it some thought, and if you feel comfortable to do so, again, let me know in the chat, or if you're watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments. Ultimately, though, the strong accessibility tool you have isn't technical, it's human. It's your team. Start with your users, especially those people with who face barriers, because if you can make it work for them, I can guarantee you can make it work for anyone. You know, bring their voices into the discovery phase, bring them into testing and into the decision making. When you include people with lived experience, you see kind of memory load challenges, you see challenges where attention might fluctuate, where there's sensory overwhelm with strong smells, loud noises, contrast issues, for example, bright lights or flashing GIFs. All of these things start to get serviced, and they allow you to fix them early. Your user journeys become smoother, barriers reduce, and trust grows. Once again, if you were to bring one user group into your design, who might that be? Might be people like myself, neurodivergent users, might it be people with low vision who might use a screen reader, or people who are new to digital tools. I was having a conversation with a gentleman called Jack just the other day, and he was saying about he finds it fascinating watching videos which old school videos which teach people how to use a computer, you know, how to move a mouse on screen, and the correlation between moving a mouse and the cursor moving. You know, quite often that might be your older relatives. It might be people who've been out of work for a while, or people with kind of learning difficulties. Where once you start with these users, as I say, the next step is identifying where in the process accessibility fits with the design and the build cycles. So tool number two is to embed this in your team. So in your team, which of the stages is most mature in your business? Is it the discovery? Is it the design? Is it the build? Or is it the testing? Do you know, chances are, if your discovery is great, then maybe you're missing things in the design. There's a great example in the chat earlier. Yeah, absolutely should be. But if it's not, flag it. To let leadership know, hey, we're missing a trick here. You might be letting things slip through the net, or not. If we haven't told our developers, we haven't told our coders that not to use this drag and drop, or that we need to consider accessibility, they might not think about it. So just by having it on the brief is going to be a big thing. Ultimately, then, to integrate accessibility well, you need it to appear not just at one stage, but at every stage. Not just at the end, but right from the initial outset. And this is exactly how you shift kind of from reactive fixes to proactive fixes. I used the ADDIE model earlier, and I showed examples of where in the process. I can guarantee you the earlier you start, the more money you're going to save. And this is where practical tools matter. Number one then is checklists. So checklists can help your team remember the essential tips. Templates, if you get your templates right, they can reduce errors and they can create consistency so you can get it right time and time and time again. Much better to replicate an accessible template than it is a not accessible one. Testing early captures issues when they're cheap and easy to fix. And the shared responsibility. So the shared responsibility prevents it from kind of being someone else. Someone else owns accessibility being the trap. What I would say is some organizations, they say, Mike, we've got an exceptional accessibility person in the business and they deal with all of this. And I go, fantastic. What happens on their sick days? What happens if they're in a meeting when the person with a need calls? Or what happens if they've been poached because of the level of experience that they bring to the table and that's no longer in your organization? So accessibility doesn't just sit on the shoulders of one individual. We all have to say. So this approach mirrors what we see in the organizations we support, and I'm letting you know this as well. So when accessibility shifts from one person's job to everyone's role, things improve a lot more substantially. So again, which of the four words make a big difference to your organization? If you're comfortable in doing it, let us know whether that's going to be the checkpoints, templates, testing, or ownership. If you're making your own notes, that's fine, just pop it there as well. Finally, we're going to finish on our final framework, and that's planning small but delivering often. And you'll see some wooden mice on the screen, and I'll explain what this means in a moment. But ultimately, in the chat, if you're comfortable to do so, probably yes or no or why and then. Does your organization sometimes feel overwhelmed by accessibility? Is it something that scares you? It's probably going to be a yes. So I'm going to preempt the chat on that one. And this is where small, safe to fail experiments work well. You don't need a huge program. You don't need a Trojan horse of accessibility heading towards your organization, making your leadership freak out. What you do need is small, manageable steps that build confidence and systems thinking. So I use an analogy here, Trojan mice. Instead of one big initiative, run lots of small experiments. Try a new template, try to audit one learning asset, try improve one learning journey in an organization, or one onboarding process, try and fix one high impact barrier, or train one team in your organization, not all your teams. Just let's get it right for learning and development first and foremost. These steps create momentum and they reduce fear. So they also make accessibility feel achievable. As soon as you can celebrate, hey, we got the templates working. You can move on to the next thing, and your team will get a dopamine hit because getting it right feels good. Ultimately, if you want to reflect on this, just ask yourself one question: what is one small improvement you could try next week? Even after the session, it might be I'm going to use bigger font size. I'm going to use lists rather than dense paragraphs, or I'm going to use a contrast checker. Start small. Just by using one new tool, you're going to make a big difference. And with that, I think we've got time for one or two questions. Where so we're going to move into Q&A. I do want to thank everyone for engaging so thoughtfully today. You have been very, very interactive in the chat, which is wonderful. It's 5:02 now, so we've got a couple of minutes for any questions and reflections. I did say earlier, if you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Microsoft Teams. Turn on your camera so that anyone who relies on lip reading can follow along. Say your name so if anyone can't see you, they know who's speaking, and then share your question. If there are no questions or you prefer to message me your questions in private, that's fine, and we will create resources and blogs to follow this as well. You are welcome to share any reflections you have in the chat, so do let me know what stood out for you today and what feels most useful or actionable in your business. I can see people loving the Trojan mice analogy is one I love, and what I'm going to do as well, whilst I'm waiting for those questions to come in, is to throw back right to the start of the session. So at the start of the session, before I move on to the final slide, I asked you a question. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how confident do you feel about accessibility? Most of you were somewhere between a 5 and a 7. I feel there were a couple of 9s, but if you're able to do so, just let me know. Just pop a number in the chat. Where do you see yourself now? Main reason I ask this question both at the end and the beginning is it allows me to see if I'm doing right in these sessions, if I am moving the needles, and so if we do notice any movements, let me know and let me know what insights you can share. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment or any raised hands. So with that, and thank you everyone who's rating themselves an 8, which is fantastic. I do want to say thank you for spending time with us today. I hope you're leaving this session with clarity, confidence, and a few practical steps which you can bring into your team straight away. You can download the slides if you haven't already. I'm using the link and I really would be grateful if you could spare 30 seconds to complete the short feedback survey. This is not the same QR code that was shared earlier. The QR code on the screen is to a feedback survey, and ultimately your comments help me share the 2026 Inclusive Insight series. So I thank you for the comments flooding in, dear, and I appreciate it. If you'd like to stay connected, make sure you're following both myself, Mike Osborne on LinkedIn, and Accessible Me as well. And make sure you're joining future sessions. We run sessions every month, and in January, we've got some treats for you. So I think we've got 3 sessions in January. We got the one that I've been publicizing for a while. I think it's just looking ahead to get you started for the year. And we've got 2 on trauma-informed design. If you've been following my work, or on the LinkedIn, you might have seen these pop up recently. We do have them on the call as well. So I'm blessed to say Abika will be delivering a session on what is trauma-informed design. And that's going to be on the 22nd of January. And on the 28th of January, I'm just excited to welcome Joe Levy, who will be doing a case study. So what does this mean in practice? So if you can, join both. Our session is not to be missed. Final reflection then, accessibility thrives when we design for people first, so take those small steps, do them consistently. So if you only make one change, do that change every time going forward, and ultimately, eventually, work to change everything. So have a North Star, have something you are working towards, and it can be a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. Set that massive goal and take steps to get there. Once again, I just want to say kind of thank you for joining, and have a great rest of the day. Have a great rest of your year. In fact, this is the final session of the year, and I look forward to seeing you in future sessions. So yeah, thank you so much for joining, everyone. Seeing the comments in chat, I'm not seeing any questions. If you do have questions, then please let me know. But yeah, Happy New Year to everyone in advance, and thank you so much for joining. With that, I'm going to stop the recording. So if you're watching on catch up, thank you for joining us on catch up as well. Take care, all the best, and we'll see you again in the new year. Bye for now.